Libertarianism is pro-immigration, pro-market, pro-trade.
More competitive, less centralized. Not military confrontations, but peaceful interaction.
The war on drugs has been actually an unmitigated disaster.
In retrospect, you think he could have done something differently?
Thank you.
Yeah.
David, 2 minutes.
So whereas I didn't very much agree with your 5 principles, inevitably when we get to immigration, the craziness comes out with the libertarians. So we're supposed to believe, hear me out on this one, that the American founders thought that, yeah, there would be no power to decide who comes into the country because they were libertarians who believed in open borders. Yeah, that's what the founders thought. And it's not in the Constitution. Well, I'm very sorry to tell you, maybe you didn't read this part when you did your oath to become a citizen. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 10. Yeah. Congress has the power to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the laws of nations. And one of the clear offenses of the law of nations is to trespass and come into a country where you're not allowed to be. You could also read a power to regulate immigration in the power of naturalization and argue that it was embedded in there. Either way, it is folly to suggest that America was founded on open borders and that the national government has no power to police its borders.
I think it's your turn.
No,
I'm happy. Let's for drinks afterwards.
So, Matthew, I think we do actually probably align more often than not on this issue. I think we do need to protect vital interests in our foreign policy as we move forward. I definitely do think we need to relook at the budget effects of what the military spending in this country are. Last year, we spent $1.2 trillion in terms of discretionary spending, 666 billion of that spent on defense. There is very little oversight of what we're actually spending on, and if you look at some of the programs and projects that are coming out of the Defense Department, the F-35 is a perfect example of something that is probably not going to be very useful for our country going forward. We print tanks because it's politically good for Rob Portman in Ohio, even though the military has said we do not need any more tanks. So yes, I'm happy to talk budget and all that stuff because I think that is something we definitely need to look into. To your point on Obama, I do think there's certainly aspects of his foreign policy that I disagree with. I think progressives would disagree with. I think you make very good points on the fact that we're going to have kids fighting in Afghanistan who were born after 9/11. We've never really had a good, clear objective in that country moving forward, and I think that's a lapse on Obama's part as well. I think it's a lapse on Trump's part as well. That said, I think what Obama did well was recognize that one of the greatest the two greatest assets we have in our foreign policy space is one, our national reputation. We tend to try to, we have promises and we try to keep them. That has been less so under this administration. And then we have not, at least in the last 2 years, taken advantage of the wide swath of allies that we have across the globe. I think we have 60 specific military partnerships with countries around the world. We have hundreds of more informal and formal on the economic ties. And we drastically do not take advantage of those because that is a world, like we set up that system post-World War II to benefit the United States. And it has benefited the United States immensely for the most part. There's one thing I want to hit on. Oh, hold on there.
I was right.
No.
Thank you, gentlemen. This brings us to the end of the 3 prompts and the main part of the debate. Now I welcome each one of you, starting with David, to give 2 minutes for closing remarks, to tie up anything that you want to address, or to address any last leftover points.
It's not 7 minutes?
No, it's. I was told 2 minutes.
I don't know.
Right?
Was it
7? Sorry.
I don't know.
It's 7. Sorry, it is. I was misinformed. It's 7 minutes each.
Yeah.
For it. If you can do it in a minute and a half, I will be impressed.
Okay.
Though. No, just kidding. 7 minutes each.
Okay.
I apologize.
Well, I began this evening by telling you why I'm a conservative. I'm a conservative because I want to secure the blessings of liberty for my fellow Americans and for our posterity. I love this country, and I feel bound to ensure that future generations are also receiving the blessings of living in a free, prosperous, and united America. Now, my fellow panelists, I don't think would disagree with the sentiment, although they sure as hell wouldn't use this language to describe their ultimate aims. The real problem with them, though, is that while they might agree in principle with the sentiment, in practice, they support policies that in the long run, will harm posterity and eventually will threaten the very existence of our country. It's not because they're malicious in intent, quite the contrary. Both of them are quite likable fellows. And I've spent enough time talking to liberals and libertarians to know that they generally mean well and that they sincerely believe that America, and the whole world for that matter, would be better off if their ideas triumphed. I also must confess that I'm a bit sympathetic to where they're coming from, since I am well aware of the seductive lure of their ideas. I used to be a liberal in college, who isn't, and I have flirted with libertarian ideas as a conservative. The appeal of each ideology is undeniable. Libertarianism, in effect, tells you that all you need to understand the whole of political reality, both at home and abroad, is the non-aggression principle, whose practical teaching is pretty simple. Consenting adults can do whatever they want, and other people's problems are never your problems unless you choose to make them so. That's it. And there, from the comfort of your dorm room, you can solve all of the thorniest problems confronting mankind. It's always the same answer. More liberty, less government. And if you ask, well, how the hell is this going to work? You're told, don't worry about it. Spontaneous order. Never mind that Hayek never said such a thing. Nope. It's spontaneous because you know liberty. Ultimately, if we had enough liberty, they would tell us, you could eliminate war, and the whole of humanity would get along. We could get rid of countries and just be our individual selves. Well, you may say, well, this sure sounds good. Who wouldn't want that? All the world living in peace and plenty, individual choice galore in all realms. Sign me up. Just tell me what to do. And this is where it gets really good. The libertarian answer is nothing. You do you. Just focus on your own self-interest. It'll all magically follow. Libertarianism, I know you said it didn't, but it really does make selfishness a virtue. It denies that we have any binding positive duties to help others. It says you're allowed to help others if you want to, but no one can force you to help your fellow citizens. Everyone is just left alone to focus on doing their own thing. And if we all do that, this is the best part, everything's just going to work out in the long run. This is libertarianism in a nutshell. Simplicity and selfishness all wrapped into one. What's not to like? Now, liberals will object. Now, they're not going to reject the utopian side. They will also promise a war in which war and famine and disease have been forever conquered, and in which the whole of humanity lives in harmony. In fact, they're actually going to one-up the libertarians and say, we're going to create a world in which every child, regardless of the circumstances in which she's born, will receive all that she needs to realize her full potential, and will have the same chance to succeed as anyone else. Let me quote President Barack Obama, who said in his second inaugural address, "We are true to our creed when a little girl born into the bleakest poverty knows that she has the same chance to succeed as anybody else. Not a good chance, the same chance." How could you resist that? What sort of a heartless monster are you? Now, it is true, our liberal friends will admit, it's going to cost a lot of money to create that world. And to their credit, they're willing to pay for it. They think it's their duty. And yes, it'll cost a lot of money, but it's also made up for in that special feeling you get from being a liberal, a feeling good about yourself. Because you care, and you're kind of smarter than everyone else. Human nature being what it is, such flattery, coupled with utopian promises, is very hard to resist. But it must be resisted. However much liberal and libertarian ideas may sound appealing, and I realize how appealing they sound, they suffer from just one little flaw. They're completely utopian. They're based on an unduly rosy view of human nature and are therefore completely impracticable. Certain moderate strands of liberalism and libertarianism, of course, are going to espouse certain sound policies. But neither one is fit to govern the country. Neither one finds any support in the tradition of political philosophy or of great statesmanship. Can you imagine for 1 second how Aristotle, Machiavelli, or Locke, to say nothing of Washington, Lincoln, or Churchill, would react if you told them that the purpose of America is to maximize individual liberty in all realms? That we should legalize the most addictive substances known to man, that we should just open up our borders for whoever wants to come here, that we can create a world in which we all get along and sing Kumbaya together. They would laugh right at you. I would like to end on an ecumenical note. I believe that there are many issues on which conservatives can collaborate with libertarians and liberals. I can only think of one where the three of us probably would get along, and that's probably overcriminalization and criminal justice reform. But then again, we can find areas in which we work together. Bipartisanship, in Washington, D.C. has seen much better days, but there is no reason why well-intentioned, open-minded people who disagree politically can't have productive conversations. And I would like to end, as I began, by thanking again the university and the three groups that are hosting us for doing this. And this is something that is missing very much on our college campuses and in Washington, D.C., where I live. Thank you.
Next, Brian.
Well, hopefully I'll be short. I know we have 7 minutes, but hopefully we'll make it. Again, I want to reiterate the thanks to the College Democrats, the College Republicans, and Equals for Liberty for putting this on. I think this has been I've had a lot of fun. I hope everyone out there has been having fun, and I hope that you find the conversation at least a little bit stimulating. As a progressive, I think I have a lot to be concerned about with the current direction of this country. I think that a lot of the values and the norms that I grew up with, that I espouse, are under constant attack now. And I do believe that we need to do something about that. I'm glad to hear, David, you like our ideas, that they're intriguing and that they tempt you to want to come over to our side. It's good to know, because I think they are good too. I do agree that, we may be a little utopian, but I think that's kind of the point. These are ideas, and as I kind of mentioned in my opening statement, this country is never going to be perfect, but we hope to strive to make it a more perfect union. And that requires constant effort and work. And that's why I always go back to those two founding principles that I believe kind of underline progressivism. One, we're a wolf pack. We are better together than we are separate. And two, if you actually take that collaboration and put it into activism, you can accomplish a lot. With that in mind, we have huge challenges facing this country right now. We have massive consolidation in our corporate interests. Workers have less and less say when they're talking about their bargaining rights as well as their take-home pay. The cost of prescription drugs is out of this world, which is a symptom of some of those instances. As I mentioned in kind of one of the earlier prompts as well, is that to make matters worse, there have been historical and cultural decisions over the course of time that have alienated and disenfranchised significant portions of the population to be underrepresented in aspects of this country. And as a progressive, I think we can change that. This also goes to the larger aspect of what we do in the world. I think when we come back to the aspect of what values we care about democracy. This was what I actually meant to say. Our conversations with Saudi Arabia post the killing of the journalist there needs to be consequences to those types of things. We do not necessarily have the vital interests we had before with that country that we do now, and I think we can probably distance ourselves a little bit more. And that goes back to the point, we stand on principles and we stand on values, and this is the type of reputation that we project to the rest of the world. That's the type of stuff that I think progressives really care about and want to move forward on. And with that, we'll close.
Thank you. Matthew?
Yeah, I don't know if I'll take all 7 minutes, but I do want to thank you all for coming out. I know all of you had probably other things to do on a Monday evening, and thank you. I'm not claiming that a libertarian world will be perfect. I'm just claiming it will be better.